the former Democrat member from the great state of Hawaii, Congressman Gabbard.
Thank you very much, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, and members, aloha. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak with you today. Benjamin Franklin said, "Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech." I love our country and I cherish our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in the Constitution. Like every one of you, I took an oath, both as a soldier and as a member of Congress, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, I've had the privilege of serving alongside many of you in Congress for 8 years, representing the people of Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District, serving on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees. I'm honored to be able to continue to serve as a Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves now for almost 20 years, where during that time I deployed to 3 war zones and participated in multiple overseas training exercises, where I had the opportunity to see firsthand what life is like in countries where there is no First Amendment, where there is no free press, where government deems itself to be the moral arbiter to its people, dictating to them what is right and wrong, what can and cannot be said, who can speak, who cannot, who is free to worship, and who is not. Now, our founders understood the importance of enshrining our God-given freedoms in the Constitution and Bill of Rights to ensure that no matter which party or person may be in power at any given time, our founding documents serve as a reminder of these freedoms that are guaranteed to every American. Thomas Paine said, "He that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from opposition. For if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself." We cannot be so short-sighted as to thinking silencing speech that we don't like today will not result in our own voices being silenced tomorrow. The work that you've all been charged with in this committee affects all Americans, and it is too important to allow it to fall victim to partisan politics. No matter how deep your differences, we must all agree to stand on the side of liberty. Unfortunately, right now we live in a country where many Americans are afraid to speak freely, afraid to express themselves, afraid to actually have real open dialogue and debate, afraid of losing their job, being canceled, or being accused of a crime, which could happen if recently introduced legislation criminalizing so-called hate speech is passed into law, speech that, no matter how abhorrent, is still protected under the First Amendment. Now, this fear and this culture of fear and self-censorship is not unfounded. We have individuals in our government often working through their arms in the mainstream media and big tech, doing exactly what our founders rejected, trying to control what we, the people, are allowed to see and say under the guise of protecting us from so-called misinformation or disinformation. Now, of course, they appoint themselves as the sole authority and voice of truth, of information, backed by the most lethal force on earth with the power to target anyone they deem a threat. They alone are the ones, self-designated, who get to decide what is true and what is false, what is information and what is misinformation or disinformation. They say they're doing this for us, that they're doing this for our own good, to protect the people. But in reality, the truth is they think that we're too stupid to think for ourselves, too stupid to discern for ourselves and to draw our own conclusions. Now, the idea that we must just blindly accept whatever the government or those in power tell us is true goes against the very essence of our Constitution and Bill of Rights, which were created as a resounding rejection of the reign of kings, churches, and authorities. They tell us we must blindly trust them or face the consequences, even though our government has a long history of lying to us, the American people. Just to cite a few examples, we were lied to about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which spurred the war that I and so many others served in and so many others sacrificed their lives in. They lied for almost 2 decades, claiming success in Afghanistan, when in fact we saw failure after failure after failure, coming at a great cost to this country. We saw lies about Vietnam that were revealed in the release of the Pentagon Papers. We saw lies about our own government illegally surveilling Americans. These are just a few examples, there are many more. Ranking Member Plaskett talked in her opening comments about how individuals in the FBI also throughout our country's history have abused their power, weaponizing those agencies to advance their own political interests. This is not and cannot be reduced to a partisan fight. The stakes are too high. We all must recognize our own responsibility to stand against such abuses. But as we sit here today, the danger is that if we choose to reject or challenge whatever those in power declare is the so-called truth, we are accused of being anti-authority. We are accused of being a danger to society, accused of spreading misinformation, and are then targeted, smeared, and called things like Russian asset, white supremacist, bigot, racist, sexist, extremist, traitor, and so on. More dangerous than any baseless smear, our own government institutions, which exist to serve the people, they are being weaponized against us. The Department of Homeland Security declared a heightened domestic terrorism threat due to 3 factors, the first of which is, quote, the proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions, end of quote. They are the ones who get to decide what those false or misleading narratives are. Former CIA Director John Brennan said in 2021 that, quote, members of the Biden team are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas. An unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, and even libertarians. End of quote. Attorney General Garland charged his newly created domestic terrorism unit with targeting those who hold, quote, anti-authority views. That included parents who dared to protest at Board of Education meetings, concerned and standing up for the right for themselves to have a say in their children's education. A draft copy of the Department of Homeland Security Quadrennial Homeland Security Review outlined their intent to target quote-unquote inaccurate information on a whole host of topics, to include the origins of COVID, vaccines, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and U.S. support to Ukraine. Their misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation team exists to, quote, counter all types of disinformation. Once again, they get to determine what this disinformation is. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg revealed on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast recently that Facebook limited the exposure of the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop story just weeks ahead of the 2020 election, only after talking with the FBI. Twitter took similar action, but they recently apologized for doing so, recognizing that their decision was wrong. The cozy relationship between White House officials, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and big tech is now well documented and results in private companies not restricted by the First Amendment doing the dirty censorship work of those in government who are not legally allowed to do so themselves. The threat big tech monopolies pose to our democracy is real and serious. I've had personal experience with this. After the first Democratic primary presidential debate in 2019, I was the most searched candidate of the night. Unfortunately, and suddenly, my Google Ads account was mysteriously suspended without any notice or explanation. There were no responses to our multiple attempts to resolve whatever problem could have caused this, but after some time passed, magically my account was reinstated, again with no explanation or apology. But their actions limited my ability to connect with voters who were actively seeking more information about my candidacy and why I was offering to serve them as President and Commander-in-Chief. This has not only happened to me, it's happened to other candidates running for various offices. Joe Kent, running for Congress in Washington State, is one I know personally of. This happens all the time, with these big tech monopolies interfering in our democracy by manipulating search results based on whatever it is that they want the American people to know about a particular candidate or issue that should be concerning to any one of us and all of us. Now, recently, we've learned that with the release of the Twitter files detailed by Matt Taibbi and others, High-level former FBI and CIA and other government officials were behind Hamilton 68 and their list of 644 social media accounts supposedly linked to, quote, Russian influence activities online. Now, Hamilton 68's work was widely cited as fact by institutions like Harvard and Stanford, by mainstream news organizations across the board, by members of the House of Representatives and Senate from both political parties, including the head of the Intelligence Committee. The problem is, it was false. Twitter themselves determined that the vast majority of counts that Hamilton 68 targeted on this list of 644 were, quote, neither strongly Russian nor strongly bots, end of quote. They were mostly anti-establishment American voices from across the political spectrum. I was one of them. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton accused me, a sitting member of Congress, a soldier, and a candidate running for president, of being, quote, groomed by the Russians. Her baseless smear worked as intended. It was something that was repeated over and over, headline after headline, article after article, pushed online in every way. This had the harmful impact that was intended. I could give you many examples of interactions that I've had with people throughout that campaign and still today. But I remember one in particular that had an impact. Just weeks after this statement was made, I was in South Carolina at a campaign event when an elderly woman came up to me, and I could tell that she was very disturbed. She came up and she put her hands on my shoulders and she looked into my eyes, her eyes welling up, hands shaking, and she said, "Look me in the eyes. I need to know if you are working for Putin." She was serious. I couldn't believe it. I looked her straight back in the eyes and expressed to her from my heart how much I love this country, so much that I'm willing to die for it. More recently, U.S. Senator Mitt Romney accused me of treason, a crime that is punishable by death under our laws. I challenged him to back this serious allegation up with evidence. What was this based on? There was no response, no explanation, no evidence, and certainly no apology. Now, these accusations are often shrugged off as, well, hey, it's politics. People say things about each other all the time. That may be easy for some of you to say, but for somebody who wears the uniform, this is serious. And it's serious not only to me, but to my fellow service members and veterans, every one of us making a decision at some point in our lives to raise our right hand, prepared and volunteering to lay our life down for this country. What does that mean in reality? It means that before every deployment, in our own hearts, we have to make peace with the possibility that we may not come home. It means writing letters to our loved ones, trying to find the words to express our love and gratitude, knowing that that may be our final goodbye. It means for those of us who do come home, doing our best every single day to honor the great sacrifices of our brothers and sisters who paid that ultimate price. This is much bigger than me or any one individual. When those who dare to challenge the establishment are targeted by this powerful conglomerate of government, corporate media, and big tech, weaponizing all that they have against the people for their own selfish gain, it has a dangerous chilling effect on free speech, and it sends a very powerful message. If you dare to challenge us, we will come after you. The more we allow this to happen, we start looking less and less like a democratic republic and more like a banana republic. Instead of a government ordained to secure these rights, we are now increasingly facing a government determined to take those rights away. George Washington warned, "For if men are to be precluded from offering their sentiments on a matter, which may involve the most serious and alarming consequences that can invite the consideration of mankind, reason is of no use to us. The freedom of speech may be taken away, and dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to slaughter. We have to stop this insanity and protect these sacred freedoms, vanquish the fear and self-censorship that is now pervasive. Every one of us taking action to breathe new life into the open marketplace of ideas that is at the heart of a thriving democracy, encouraging vigorous and substantive debate, encouraging people to think for themselves so we can draw our own conclusions, where we can disagree without devolving into hate, where we can respect each other as fellow Americans and treat each other with aloha. The work you have before you is critical for all of these reasons. The stakes are high. The consequences, for better or worse, will be long-lasting. For the sake of the American people, our freedom, and the future of this country we love, I pray we can set aside our partisan differences and commit to standing together to defend the constitutional right of every American to live free. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congresswoman Gabbard. We appreciate those fine remarks. Congressman Raskin, we thank you for being here. Senator Johnson, we thank you as well for your testimony. The committee will stand in recess for 5 minutes more or less to get ready for the second panel.
When did you ready?